So when I was a little girl, I always imagined that I was very athletic. No, I wasn't. I was very overweight, and I never played any sports. Maybe I would be on the jungle gym at the most, but I was never very athletic. But I always thought I would be. And so after I graduated high school, I went straight into college, and I didn't do so well because I was bored, and so instead I drank a lot and worked at a bar. And I was kind of chunky and also failing out of school. And I got a letter from the bursar's office saying that I was going to lose my scholarship because my grade point average had fallen too low. And I went and worked New Year's Eve at the bar that I worked at, which is the largest bar in Niagara Falls, and it was a pretty happening place for Niagara Falls. And I got home that night, and in one pocket I had the letter from the bursar's office saying that I was going to lose my scholarship and I wasn't going to be able to pay for school otherwise. And in the other pocket I had the $1,000 in tips that I'd made that night. And I had maybe another $500 in the bank saved up. And so I sat there and really thought hard about how far I could get on $1,500 out of Niagara Falls, because I had to leave on $1,500 before I'd have to prostitute myself. Because those were the options in my mind, you know, college or prostitution. And so the next morning I got up, New Year's Day, I got up and I went to the recruiter's office and I joined the Army. Which was good because it was a really great weight loss program. And I also found out that I was an athlete. And I remember my first day of basic training, they take you up to the bays where your company is gonna be sleeping, and they make you put away all your civilian stuff into the GI-issued duffel bag, and they lock it up because you're not gonna see it again until you graduate boot camp. And then they do what they call smoke you. They smoke you. And the reason they call it smoking you is because they want to get your body heat up so high and you sweating so much that it's like you're smoking. And what that consisted of was running in place and side straddle hop, also known as the jumping jack, push-ups and sit-ups, and as soon as you thought that you were going to not be able to continue doing the thing you were doing, they would switch you into the next one, and it felt like there was about 3 to 6 hours of this going on. I'm sure it was only 1 hour, but it felt really horrible. And all around me, all the women in my bay were just crying. All I could hear was crying, sobbing, just from the toes, kind of weeping. And we're in the front-leaning rest, which is the up position of the push-up. And I look up, and across from me in the bay, in another section of the bay, is a girl who's like me, really young, and unlike me, sobbing, and just tears and snot pouring out of her face and sweat, and she's like in a pool of yuck and misery. And I just look at her and I just kind of do this like, and so I basically shrugged, smiled, and winked at her as best as I could in the front leaning rest. And we made eye contact and she instantly stopped crying. And it was like she knew that that meant that it was going to be fine and she was going to be able to get through this. And it was kind of this neat thing. But throughout the Army, I just kept working on working out. I never had an issue with it. I never had an issue with the physical difficulty because to me, I was always in my head thinking, I'm just going to go until my body says I can't go anymore, and then I'm not going to go, and that's all there is to it. And that's why I wasn't crying, and I helped this other person go through that. And throughout my Army career, I kept thinking that I'm just going to go until my body doesn't go, and then I'm not going to go anymore. And towards the end of my Army career, which was only 3 years, about the last 6 months, I was really fit. And like me and my soon-to-be husband were running and cycling and hiking and anything active. That's what we were doing. We were very, very active. But it was about 6 months before I left before my time was up in the Army, and my left ankle was like super swollen all of a sudden, and for about 2 months it wouldn't go down. And I had toes on my right foot that were just like constantly crinkled and painful. And then I had a pain in my elbow that wouldn't go away. And my ring finger, I couldn't wear my engagement ring because it was like one big sausage. And then my back was all swollen and painful in the morning, and I couldn't walk sometimes, and it was really horrible. So I went to the orthopedist in the medical center on base, and the woman was like, well, what do you want to be seen for? And I told her, you know, my ankle and my toes and my elbow and my back. And she's like, oh, okay, but what do you want to be seen for? And I was like, well, all of those things. And she goes, oh, okay, but we can only see one body part at a time. So I chose my ankle because I figured that was the one that was impeding me the most. And I got diagnosed with Achilles something or other that required surgery. And the day before my surgery, I go into pre-op, and the doctor is looking at my x-rays, and he's playing with my foot, and he's looking at my x-rays, and he's looking at my chart, and he's looking at my foot, and like this goes on for about 5 minutes, and then he walks out of the room without saying a word to me, and comes back in 10 minutes later and says, we're not going to do the surgery. I was like, what are you talking about? And he goes, your ankle's doing exactly the opposite thing of what it needs to do for this surgery, so I've misdiagnosed you, and we're not going to do the surgery, and you need to get a second opinion. And so I was just deflated, and I'm, at this point, like, I don't know what the fuck is going on with me, and I'm so scared. And I go to see this other doctor, and he looks at me, looks at my ankle, and he goes, well, is there anything else going on with your body? And I'm like, yes! And I told him all the different parts that he wasn't allowed to look at aside from my ankle. And he was like, oh, I think you need to go see a rheumatologist. I'm pretty sure you have arthritis. And I just looked in his eyes. And as much as Amber, the girl in the bay, had stopped bawling and crying and snotting, that's as much as I started right at that moment. Because for the same reason, I felt this instant relief of, oh, okay, this means I'm going to get through this because it has a name, it has a thing. Like this is something we can deal with instead of this unknown. And so I started seeing a rheumatologist, and I did have arthritis, and I started getting on medication, and I was taking 13 pills 3 times a day to include, as needed, Vicodin, oxycodone, and methadone for pain. And it wasn't really helping, and I was in massive amounts of pain. And at one point, my husband, we lived in a 2-story apartment, and I was already out of the Army at this point, would have to pull me out of bed in the morning and take me to the bathroom, and then carry me downstairs and put me on the sofa so that I wouldn't be bored in bed all day, but I could be bored in front of the TV all day. And I was unable to be an athlete anymore. And this lasted for a good year or two where I was sketchy at best for walking. And then I got better, and I got on better medication, and I got much better, to the point where last September, me and my athletic body, athletic self, decided to play some trampoline dodgeball. Yay. And I tore my ACL. And then this past January, I had surgery on it. And it's still healing, and it still hurts sometimes. And a lot of my friends are often ask me, you know, why do you push so hard? Why do you always push yourself beyond the point? Because they see me like trying to run even though my knee hurts, or trying to do CrossFit even though my knee hurts. And the real reason is because besides the fact that there's an athlete in me, there's also this knowledge that so few people have of what it feels like to have that taken away. And so, until it's taken away again, I'm gonna push myself harder than I probably should. Always. Thank you.